Blackballed, 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 Blackballed.
What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and you're watching Blackballed. My guest today, I'm really excited about having this man on, and there's a bunch of reasons why. He has sold, as the intro just told you, over 7 million books worldwide. He's Canadian, but he was born in the United States, but raised in Canada. And one of the real fascinating things about him that we'll get into is his relationship early on as an up and coming writer, and his relationships that he had by having the gusto to actually send his stuff to famous writers who were already sort of like veterans of the trade. And I find that really amazing because the rule of thumb is like never send stuff to famous writers when you're not famous. But he did it and it worked. And his name is Linwood Barclay. Linwood, how are you, buddy?
I'm just great. How you doing, James? Nice to be here.
Thank you. That was the one of the thing that, like, I did my Linwood Barclay deep dive and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And then I saw a quote from you saying, I did what I shouldn't have done, and sent a manuscript. I think it was to Margaret Lawrence and to Kenneth Millar. And I was like, that is so ballsy. But would you advise any writer these days to, for example, send something to you or someone, that has already made it in the trade?
Well, I'll start. First of all, that Margaret Lawrence, who was a wonderful mentor to me, that wasn't quite the same because she was a writer in residence at Trent, where I was going, and she was inviting aspiring authors to come and see her and bring stuff to show her. So what I did there was not nearly the imposition that I did with Kenneth Millar, who wrote under the name Ross MacDonald and was immensely successful as the author of the Lou Archer novels. And so very, very quickly, what I did there was I wanted to write a thesis at university about the private eye as a kind of iconic character in literature. But I really wanted to focus in on Ross MacDonald and Lou Archer. So I wrote to him care of his publishers in New York, got the address for Alfred Knopf, and sent this letter off. And lo and behold, one day I get a letter to my house from him, handwritten. And he pointed me to this article and that article that had been written about him and a Newsweek cover story and so forth and so forth. So now I had his home address, right? And I wrote him back and I said, listen, you can say no and so forth, but I've written a novel and can I send it to you? Which I appreciate now is just really a huge imposition, And he wrote back and he said, sure.
Wow.
So I sent it, and that was the beginning of a very long correspondence. I have on my shelf here, I have just a stack of letters back and forth between us, which culminated when he and his wife, Margaret Miller, also a very noted mystery novelist, were coming to Peterborough. And he called and said, would you like to have dinner with us? So I spent an entire evening with Ross MacDonald, who, for any other kid, this would be like getting a call and saying, hey, it's Wayne Gretzky, you want to hang out? Mm-hmm. But for me, there was nobody on the planet who I was revered more than him and his work. And so I spent the whole evening, they have dinner and shooting the shit, and took him to tour of Trent University and so forth. So, but it was, as you say, it's not the sort of thing. And of course, today with, internet and websites and all sorts, I mean, you can get 10 requests a day from people saying, can I send you my book? And took a little more effort back in the 70s. You had to write a letter and wait a few weeks and so forth.
Yeah.
But now someone sends a note and says, "Hey, can I send my book to you? I'll send it in 5 minutes." No, please don't.
Yeah. I was going to invite Margaret Atwood on the show to talk about a bunch of stuff when the Supreme Court decision for abortion came out. I think I wanted to have her on the show. And then when I was like trying to find a way to contact her, the only way you can contact Margaret Atwood is if you handwrite a letter, which I think is brilliant in a way, because they're probably the only letters she answers,
I can't. I mean, she and I used to have the same publicist at a different publishing house, so there might have been another way, but I kind of like that policy because it means you really do have to make an effort.
Yeah. Stephen Fry is the same way. I sent a letter to him last year, and he sent back a note that said, "Thanks for your letter."
There you go. Well,
yeah, thank you.
That's quite touching.
Yeah, right. Okay, so here, first of all, here's the book. Your new book is called "Take Your Breath Away." I was telling you off air. I'm going to tell you again because I think it's funny. That when I found out, I'm going through a separation right now. When I found out that it was about a man who may have gotten away with killing his wife, I was like, okay, I'm hooked. This is something I want to read. As a dark humor guy. When I read
it's not intended as a manual, just so you know.
Yeah, no, I know. I have my copy here. I'm going through it. I have Post-it notes at the key parts. But when I was distracted by reading some of the reviews, not just from this, but like, is it true that people still get mad at you, even though you write in this genre and you do it very well? You sold over 7 million books. At the profanity, people get mad at swearing. Really?
Well, it's funny you should mention that because I used to get those kinds of letters or emails pretty regularly, where people were upset with the language, the use of 4-letter words in the book. But I have to say that over the last few years, I've seen far fewer of them. Maybe even those people who were used to be offended by that have just given up. Maybe they just know it's a lost cause. But I don't get those very often. But I used to get them, this was not the original with me, but Mark Billingham, who's a crime writer whose work I really like, and I'm going to get to interview him at the Motive Crime Fiction Festival in Toronto the first weekend of June. He would say his response to that is, so you're okay with being entertained by depictions of murder and cruelty and suffering and all of those terrible.
I think you use dismemberment as your
dismemberment, yeah. But you want it with nice words. Maybe this is the wrong genre for you.
Yeah, you think?
I mean, you can't, unless you're watching Murder, She Wrote and Jessica Fletcher or something. It's it's gonna get edgy.
Yeah. Listen, I want to fanboy out here a little bit because I'm not a novelist. I'm a writer. I do nonfiction. I have a book deal right now. I'm writing with Mike Bullard, but I look at 7 million copies sold, and is there a moment like when your success first starts? Is there a moment where you're like, do you just have to keep your head down and keep working, keep plowing ahead, or do you allow yourself ever to get lost in the idea that fuck, like millions of people are reading my shit? Like, this is amazing. Like, how do you balance that?
Well, I have a large humbling network in place in the form of my family. If I ever think I get full of myself, they remind me, no. And it really is. It in fact, rather than sort of think, oh my God, isn't this great? Sell us many books. What it also can. The flip side of that is this creates more pressure, kind of a good kind of pressure, but it creates more pressure. So if you're selling this many books, you can't go out into the market with a book that's terrible or just sort of half-assed or whatever. It has to be good because you're competing against yourself. You're competing against the books that you've done, and so you can't coast. You really need to try to maintain the standard that you've set for yourself. So I do think occasionally it still seems a little unbelievable because the book that broke me out was a book called No Time for Goodbye, which was my 5th novel, and that book kind of went supernova. And I certainly had no idea that was going to happen. That book alone has sold probably 2.5, 3 million copies. But when I handed that book into my publishers, I had no idea. I don't think they did either. It just was something about it that clicked, particularly in the UK, because that was the single best-selling novel of the year in 2008 in the UK. So that kind of shot me out of the cannon. But ever since then, the pressure's on. Like, you got to write a book that was better than that one.
Yeah. And you're in a field, like the genre that you write in is really competitive. Like, it's not,
Yeah.
you know.
And yet it's a really nice community. Like we all, us are all good friends. We give each other, blurbs, and, email or tweet about each other's books and so forth.
Yeah,
And I think we might have overstated it in your intro that the best crime writer in the world. I think there's
I was trying to be nice.
A lot of them who I would hold at a higher level and who sell a lot more than I do. And so, but I'm glad to, even be somewhat in that company.
Does that give you something to shoot for in a sense? Because like being like humility itself is a good starting point for, evolving even further as a writer, isn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, I guess I just, I expect when every book comes out, my fear is that it's going to tank. That even if the other ones have done well and have a good track record, there's always this fear that the new book comes out and it'll be over. Like people say, yeah, you know what, we've had enough of reading him. We're going to go read somebody else. So it's overconfidence is not a problem. I'm more worried about can we keep this going?
You have a network right now. I also read that includes people like Stephen King, where you guys will like send books that are not published yet to each other to sort of get each other's feedback. Is there ever a time where one of you will be like, yeah, it's not really hitting? Like, has that ever happened? Because I can't imagine you guys just giving each other books and it just being like, this is awesome, and that's just what you say to each other all the time because you guys are really good writers,
Well, and we do exchange, advanced copies often. I always will send him an advanced copy of mine. Well, first I'll email and say, "Do you want it?" He goes, "Yes, he wants it," and please send it. And in fact, I was emailing back and forth with him earlier today, and well, we just, I'm a huge admirer of his books, and we all have Stephen King books that we love and others we don't like as much and so forth. But I think that when you look at his overall output and how astonishing it is, and also I think that so many writers who would be at his stage of a career, a lot of them really do coast and they just kind of mailed in. And I think some of his best, most ambitious books have been done in the last 10, 11 years, like 1122 or 1123. The one, the Kennedy one. I always get the numbers mixed up. 112263. I thought that The Institute was just a fantastic novel. Cider I really love. So he's not coasting. He's still turning out this really ambitious material. And so I'm a huge fan of his, and he professes to be a fan of mine. And, we did an event kind of like this, virtual, back in September. And it was a kind of interviewing each other. And he started bringing up plot points in our latest book, like, how did you do this? How did you do that? And I thought, he's really reading the stuff, like he knows it. Right. But if you told me when I was sitting in a movie theater with my wife watching Carrie when it first came out, if you told me that I would have any sort of connection with him, that guy later, I would have said that seems unlikely.
He's part of the cultural fabric of the United States of America. Like he's, I didn't know what mailbox baseball was until I saw Stand By Me and then went back and read The Body, which it was based on.
Yeah.
And I was like, and now I live in the country now. Stephen King is on my mind every single day because whenever I see one of those mailboxes, the only thought that comes to my mind is mailbox baseball from Stand By Me.
But look at all the things that he has created that are completely ingrained in our culture now, whether it's, Cujo, the rabid dog, or Pennywise the clown, or, there's so many, Carrie, Pet Cemetery, all of these things that are, have become completely ingrained in our culture. All of these things from just one guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Even the character name in Dead Zone, John Smith, was for me, what it felt like is like that character felt like a nobody. So you just give him the most common name of all time. Like he's just
Yeah.
so talented. To have someone like that also be your peer and to tell you and to praise your work. I mean, that's like Nolan Ryan calling up somebody and saying, "Can you give me advice on how you do the two seam fastball?" Because
He's not looking for advice. He doesn't need advice from me.
right.
But I continually be amazed by his work.
James Patterson. I work at a library a couple days a week, and I joke now that James Patterson writes so many books that his pen name is Danielle Steele. I'm just, is he, I'm not trying to trash anyone. I'm just trying to figure out how the business works sometimes because he churns out so many books. And I'm just wondering, like, and then he has these co-writes, and I'm like, how does the business work behind the scene? Like, some of those co-writes, are they like the bulk of the work is done by the lesser known name, and then James Patterson name put there to sell books? Like, again, I'm not trying to try. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm friends with one of his former co-writers, and my understanding of how that works is he comes up with an outline of the story, and then he gives it to the co-writer to actually write it out, write the whole thing out. And then it goes back to Patterson, and he goes through it and makes fixes and so forth. And that I'm told that's the process. Maybe it's changed. So I mean, somebody asked him once, "Well, isn't writing the long part, the text, isn't that the real big part of the job?" And his response was, "Well, that's why I get somebody else to do it." So, but it's clearly works.
Yeah.
And it's a system that's working for him. And and so what can I say? I mean, he's a mega bestseller, but and he has a huge audience. But that's my understanding of how it works.
Can you describe what we're looking at in this picture?
That is me at about, I'm going to say age 11 or 12, maybe 12, and that's at a trailer park and cottage resort south of Bob Cajun in the Kawarthas called Green Acres. So in 1966, my parents bought this cottage resort trailer park when I was 11. And my dad was a very successful, or had been a very successful automotive illustrator. He worked in advertising. He was a commercial artist, and he would draw these beautiful airbrushed renderings of cars, and these ads would appear in Life, Look, Sorry, Post. And as the 60s progressed, photography killed what my father did, and there was no demand for it anymore. So the parents decided to switch gears, and they bought this cottage resort and trailer park. And so, which was kind of a huge lark for me up until the age of 16, when my father died of lung cancer, or cancer that had spread everywhere from lung cancer. And I essentially took over running that camp. I kind of grew up overnight. I mean, my mom managed it, but I was looking after all the sort of operation of it. And it as well, to some degree, kind of looking after a brother who was 11 years older, who had suffered from schizophrenia. So I kind of just grew up overnight. But I used to ride that tractor. I had 10 acres of grass to cut. And having a John Deere riding tractor is just one of the greatest things in the world if you want to be a writer, because you just sit on that thing and you dream up plots and think of stories you could write and so forth. And I was, like when I was 14, 15, I thought I was so cool. I would wash and wax the tractor, because I was sure that the ladies would be really impressed with that.
Were you looking over your shoulder to see if they were looking at you?
Look at that green gleaming hood on that lawn tractor. Is that guy hot or what?
Every time I smell grass, I think of you, Linwood.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's one thing I miss. I miss not having a property with big, I could just have a John Deere tractor again. That was so much fun.
Yeah, like Forrest Gump. He didn't even have to do it. He had a lot of money. He just kept doing it. What is the difference then between, because I'm a big nostalgia fiend. Like I cling to it. I sometimes I think I manufacture it. When you're at the beginning of your career as a writer versus now, what do you tap into? Is it the same thing in order to find the inspiration to keep writing for the next book?
I'm always looking for a great hook. I figure there are these ideas floating around out there in the ether, and I just need to grab one of them or have one of them just land on me that I think, okay, that can work and be this year's book. Now I need to start writing a new novel probably by October, somewhere in there. Like the novel that would come out next year is written and delivered that book, but I haven't done the edits on it yet. So I need this one great idea a year, and it's like, and I kind of, if I actually consciously make an effort to try to think of what that book would be, I probably won't. Nothing will happen. You just have to kind of wait for the moment. Like I did a book a few years ago called Elevator Pitch, which was about a very different kind of serial killer in Manhattan who was killing people by sabotaging elevators. And they just go, kind of.
Wow.
And I had just been listening to the radio, and CBC was talking about how, with the pace of condo construction by the lake in Toronto, these huge high rises, that they didn't have enough elevator inspectors to keep up with the pace of construction. There hadn't been a problem, but they just were short of inspectors. And the idea was just there. Like I just heard that note. What if you had a guy who was sabotaging elevators deliberately to kill people? And so sometimes it's just waiting for some sort of event that triggers a different idea. And I just hope and pray that there'll be one a year somehow.
Yeah, I mean, and inspiration's a weird thing. I have this weird theory that we're at the beginning of a renaissance in everything that's art related because of the 2-year pandemic where most of us were kind of stuck inside. I know a lot of people that put out that had started to work on basically their life's work, like whatever they were passionate about. There was all these passion projects. There was all these people that had free time to write and to paint. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, because it seems like we almost needed the Renaissance too. Like, there's been a lot of stagnation in the last 15 years with with technology sort of like taking over the mind space of people. And I just think this pandemic, I could be totally wrong, but I feel like in the next 2 years we're going to see the result of what this pandemic did to people who were creative. I know it's an out of left field question, but I was just wondering what your thoughts were.
Well, it's an interesting question. I have never thought of it quite in terms of creativity. I think that we're feeling the effects in a million other ways, whether it's supply chain and how we, all these sort of things. But in terms of creativity, speaking personally, I mean, writing is a very isolating profession to begin with. I mean, I don't play in a club, so it's not like I couldn't do a gig for 2 years. I could still. I've written 2 novels during the pandemic. So what I missed was the actually going out on tour and actually meeting people face to face and signing their books. That was all gone. But I think that, but whether there will be a kind of creative resurgence, I don't know. I don't have a lot of thought on that. I think in some ways, a lot of people became more creative during the pandemic because they were looking for outlets, or they now have time to do things that they didn't before, and so they started. They couldn't do their regular work, so they created, whether it was sculpture, or they wrote, or there was music and so forth. Whether we'll see something happening, I don't know. I mean, I'd have been just perfectly fine if it had not happened. I've been okay. Yeah. I don't think I can't. I mean, I'm trying to think if there were any real bonuses that have come out of this. I know that except for my people at the bank tell me that we are now 5 years ahead of where the banks wanted us to be in terms of doing our own banking and depositing checks with a camera and all that stuff. We're just light years ahead of where they thought they would ever get us. Right. But I mean, that just means that there's more stuff we have to do ourselves that others don't do for us anymore.
Yeah, I mean, out of necessity, right? And it's the hungry artists really that I guess I'm thinking of. Like the musicians are come to mind. There's no better music usually that a musician will put out than the music they put out when they're still starving. And that's why the sophomore jinx happens, right? That you have your whole life to write your first album, and then you have to write your second album, and you have 6 months, right?
There's a whole other topic about people who have a breakout hit novel or other, a movie or something, and then you have to do a second one, and there's this kind of paralysis for some people. It's like, well, this big first one was a hit. Now, what on earth am I going to do? And I was sort of lucky in that regard, in that the book that became a massive hit for me was actually my 5th, And by the time it came out, I had written the 6th one already. So I kind of was able to avoid that. But that can be really paralyzing. I have a friend who, like, he must be almost 10 years now, who wrote this legal thriller that was just fantastic, and it did really well. And he still hasn't done a book since. It's been 10 years, and I think that maybe that's what happened. Some people just get like, well, I can't repeat that, so I'm not going to try.
Even Hemingway's wasn't the first book he wrote, Old Man in the Sea, but there was like the 4th one that he published or something like that.
That I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, it happens. I think that when people hit it out of the park the first time, that's a tough one to try to like.
Well, yeah, like think of, was it Alice Sebold, The Lovely Bones? That came out in 2003, I think. And that was just an immense success. And then she did a second novel that didn't do too much. I mean, as far as I know, we haven't heard a lot. She hasn't had a big hit since. But that's true of a great many people, and their subsequent work maybe every bit as good, but it's just that the people went, well, I really love that one, but I don't want to take a chance on reading another one by that. I don't.
Yeah, well, it's the Salinger thing, right? Like, you put out an amazing book your first go around, and then, I mean, he disappeared in a sense, but when he died, they found all of the stuff that he had written, and apparently it was pretty marvelous stuff. Like, he did it. Yeah, the whole genealogy of the characters inside Catcher in the Rye and everything like that. So, I don't know, it's just interesting. But you started out, you worked for the Toronto Star for like a decade or so, didn't you?
Well, longer than that. I was at the Toronto Star for 26 years.
Oh, wow.
I went to the Star in 1981. I went in trying to get a reporting job, but they didn't have anything. They said, well, we're really short of copy editors, and do you have a lot of editing experience? And I said, sure, which I did not. I had some, but from another paper, but not really very much. So they hired me to work on the desk, and it turned out I was pretty good at it. I was a good editor. So I was an editor in various capacities. I was hired as a copy editor, and in under a year, I was assistant city editor. I was the news editor. I was chief copy editor. I was the life section editor. I did all those jobs until for the first 12 years that I was at the Star. And then a column gig became available, allegedly a humor column. And I applied and I got it. And so for the next 13 or more years, I wrote 3 columns a week for the paper. And I always say allegedly, because if you write a really bad sports column, it's still obviously a sports column. But if you write a really bad humor column and nobody laughs, is it really a humor column? And so I always felt I needed to qualify it, because when you write humor in a newspaper, unless there's a little label that says satire or something, there will always be someone who thinks it's true, even if it's so obviously is not.
Yeah.
And so you had to start. That was always a bit fun. I mean, one time I wrote very quickly now, years before it was still up there circling the globe, I wrote about tongue-in-cheek places to send your kids for summer camp, and I suggested you send your kid to the Mir space station camp, the Russian satellite. And I said, but if you do, dress them warmly because it's very cold in space, and send them with lots of rolls of duct tape because there's holes in the hull. The whole thing's falling apart. I swear to God, a guy called the paper the next day and he said, you didn't put in a phone number. Now, what do you tell a guy like that? You know what I mean?
Bless his heart. I don't know.
I wouldn't want to be his kid. Like, guess where you're going?
Yeah.
Like,
Good luck getting him there. Did you work with Linda Hurst when you were at the Star?
Yes, I did. Some, yeah, I did work with Linda. She's amazing. She's an amazing writer. Amazing, yeah.
She was great. I became sort of friends with her for a while, and then she sort of went off the radar a little bit. But I sort of retraced a lot of her work. She was really good. Like she had an ability to sort of like paint a picture. She danced with Prince Charles once and wrote a column about it, and it was just like, it wasn't like overly, oh, he was so amazing. It was like, I was nervous. Can he feel my sweat? Like, she was so human the way that she wrote. I really enjoyed her. But
she was quite unique. She was a very, very excellent writer and a really great perspective on things. So yeah, you're right. She was terrific.
Yeah, the Toronto Star newsroom. Christy Blatchford used to tell me that I was born 2 decades too late because I'm 45, and at the time I was in my late 20s, and I just wanted to work at the Toronto Star or the Globe and Mail, and that's all I wanted.
You
And
know,
she, yeah,
I mean, especially when I was on the news desk, not the city desk, and worked right in the heart of the newsroom and worked on it at deadlines to put the paper. Like, I mean, I would come in for years. I would come in at like 3 in the afternoon, and we would build a paper.
mhm.
We would have all these stories, we'd have all these photographs, and we would think, okay, we're going to do this thing, and we're going to sit down and we make a paper, and then we get half of it done, and a plane would crash, and we'd throw out everything we did, and we'd start again, and with a third of the time or much less.
Yeah.
And it was, next to being able to write a column, it's the most fun I have ever had, because you just never knew when you came in at 3 it was just going to be a normal day or if all hell was going to break loose. And and to be in the center of that, I mean, and those times really are gone. It's not just like that. I mean, newsrooms are very short staffed. We always had an army of people to do things. And if there was a major event, I would call it carpet bombing an event. We would carpet bomb an event with all the photographers and reporters and just go nuts. And we would call down and say, we're going to take 8 clear ad-free pages to do this story. And we would. And it was so much fun.
Was it the manual layout process that made it kind of exciting?
Well, that was
I mean, that make it annoying, but
well, I mean, in my time at Star, I laid out with a pencil and a ruler thousands of newspaper pages, wrote and then cleared and wrote thousands of headlines and picked pictures and sized them and so forth, all done. And then you roll it up in the tube and it goes to the pneumatic tube and goes out to composing. And then, you're running around. It was all like that. But it was the fact that where we produced the paper and drew the pages was also the same room where the reporters were and where people were shouting at each other, the fire's here, go here, and get on the phone, don't go there. And so you were in that. It was just all happening right in this big room. And God,
that's like a true ecosystem of news.
Yeah, it was just so much fun. I mean, every once in a while you see a movie like, there's so many terrible movies about newspapers, but you watch a movie like All the President's Men or Spotlight and watch the newsrooms and how they're really working. I think that's what, or the Post, the more recent one, the Spielberg movie. That's what really big city newsrooms are really like, and they're amazing. And that's just a favorite line in the Post with Tom Hanks playing Ben Bradley. Yeah, Ben Bradley. And someone comes in with all these documents they've acquired. And he says, give it to so-and-so, let him sort it out. And then he's trying to go back into his office and he sort of puts his finger on the desk and he goes, what fun. And I think that's what it's like.
I know what it's like. Christy Blatchford was right. I was born 2 decades too late. I'm so idealistic about the news because when I was a kid, the first news clip I remember seeing was a historical news clip. I think it was Walter Cronkite talking about JFK. Yeah. And the way that it was explained to me by my dad was, about how news worked and how it's different now. And this is even before the internet, and it was still different to him. And then technology came, and then they started cutting staff in investigative news and in foreign bureaus and all that kind of stuff. I didn't think we'd start talking about this, but I'm just going to ask you anyways. Is news fixable, given technology, given how we receive it?
Well, I think that what we have really lost is local coverage, in-depth local coverage, because what happened certainly with newspaper chains and so forth, you started to get all this consolidation. And so, it used to be you'd have a movie reviewer in Winnipeg and a movie reviewer in London, Ontario, and somebody reviewed movies in Toronto, and all these and wherever these people were, they brought their own kind of sensibility to reviewing that movie. Then you get a chain and think, you know what? We don't need all those movie reviewers. We need one, and we're going to put that review in every single paper from Vancouver out to St. John's. So you start to lose local respect. Even worse with having a reporter in Ottawa covering politics. Well, a reporter who covers politics who's from Toronto has a very different audience and different questions to ask of a politician, of a prime minister, than one in Alberta or whatever. But then they think, we just need one reporter in Ottawa, you can cover for the whole country. So you start losing all this local angle and local interest. And not only that, if you start cutting staff, you just don't even have people who are covering things in your own community. And TV news isn't going to do it. They just they're like a skipping stone over the surface. Here's a car accident, here's a fire, bloody dog, here's the weather, see you later. So you're not getting that kind of in-depth coverage, and I think that's a serious problem. And I don't know what the fix for it is, because I think a lot of newspapers have been trying to find a different business model that really works, and they're struggling.
Yeah. I think, do you think COVID exposed the news? Not that it wasn't already kind of seen as watered down and failing in a lot of ways, but did COVID sort of expose that shorthandedness of the news?
I think the real impact of COVID in some way on newspapers and that is because everyone started working remotely from home. Like the Toronto Star, they started being able to do the entire newspaper with all of their editors and everybody, virtually none of them in the Toronto Star building. And they were all around, and they all doing it and doing the composition, the composing the pages, layout on the screen and sending it places, which was amazing. Technologically, it was amazing. And what it meant was then lots of newspapers thought, geez, we don't really need this newsroom or this building. Let's just get rid of it. And we can save a fortune there. And that's unfortunate because, yes, it's great you can work from home, but there's something about having a bunch of people physically together in an environment. Somebody is working on a story, is on the phone and says something to somebody, and somebody over here hears it and says, wait a minute, I'm working on another angle to that story. And then they can talk and they can sort of, so I think that that's a shame. But I certainly think that COVID was not an opportunity to make journalism better, but became an opportunity for news organizations to find new ways to save money and cut back on what they do.
Did you have any like during COVID and we saw these protesters in Ottawa and everything, were you do you stay out of that kind of political discussion, or did you have because you live in Randy Hillier's riding, don't you, in Prince Edward County?
Ooh, well, I don't think he covers Prince Edward County. He doesn't.
Oh, okay.
Thank God. But I mean, when we're out that way. But I mean, I live right in downtown Toronto, and I've never been afraid to speak my mind. I mean, I certainly did when I had a column. I mean, now I have my outlet is Twitter, and so if something really pisses me off, or I have some sort of snarky comment to make about something, I express it in 280 characters instead of 600 words, which tells me that the columns were overwritten. But
Twitter really did a good job at teaching writers how to trim the fat.
Yeah, it really teaches you how to edit, make every word count. It's like screenwriting. But so every once in a while too, you'll express some political opinion, and someone says, you shouldn't do that. We just, we'd like your books, but we don't want to hear from you about that. And I think, this is why I became a writer, to keep my thoughts to myself.
Right.
So sometimes you piss people off and others, but I just can't worry about it.
Yeah. Are you now back at it the way that your schedule was intended to be? Are you traveling? Are you,
Not quite yet. I'm actually doing 2 in-person events over the next couple of weeks. The first in-person events that I have done since the pandemic began. I'm doing an event on Friday of this week for the Belleville Mayor's Arts Festival. I'm going to be there. And also the first weekend of June, there is a crime fiction conference put out by the Toronto International Festival of Authors. It's a crime fiction conference called Motive. And they've attracted a lot of, big name crime writers to come. And I'm going to be in person for 2 things. I'm going to interview Mark Billingham, one of my favorite writers. And then I'm doing a solo event on Sunday, June 5th. It's at Harbourfront in that area there. But it's nice to get back to that.
And that would be for Take Your Breath Away, yeah?
That'll be for that. Yeah, I'll be able to actually in person autograph copies of that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, the cool thing, watching, because I saw a bit of your schedule, is the excitement of having a new book out. It must be one thing. Do you? Because when I went to go look at reviews and stuff, I look at reader reviews more than I look at critic reviews, just because I think it's you're at the home base of the people that actually buy your book. The book came out when? Just like 2 days ago,
It
and
came
there's
out
like
a week ago today.
a week ago. Sorry. And there's and literally Goodreads and two other sites, and there's like thousands of reviews already.
Well, it came out. It did come out in the UK on February 3rd. So
Okay.
that's where. So bulky reviews are people who've had a chance to read it over the last 3 months or so.
And the British really love your stuff. Like that you sell like most of your books in the UK, I think, don't you?
Yeah, well, I do very, very well in the UK and Ireland. We've sold millions of copies over there. I do well. The place I do very, very well is France in translation. They made a TV series out of one of my books in France. So France is really good. And of course, Canada is fabulous for me, and the US just does very well. So there's lots of other countries that I get. Sometimes they get packages to the door. I'll get a translation edition of one of my books, and I don't even know what it is because even my name is in some sort of. I just don't understand. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Well, listen, I know that you were born in Connecticut, but and moved to Canada when you were like 4,
Yeah.
and raised here. I don't know if you're a dual citizen or not, but I consider you to be a native son of Canada. Like I just,
I feel sort of 80% Canadian. I mean, I've lived here since just before I turned 4, and I am a dual. I've got 2 passports. So
well, listen. I know this sounds ridiculous because you're very accomplished, but I am proud of you as a Canadian. Like I like that there are Canadian writers like yourself who are making not just a splash worldwide, but are like considered top tier writers in your genre or just overall. And I know you have to go, so we're going to let you go now. But yeah, I just wanted to let you know that because you inspire me to write better. And I'm going to totally send you my books. I don't care. It worked for you, right? So I'm just going to follow in your footsteps, and we'll see how it goes. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. I really do, and nice to have a chance to talk to you today. And I understand you had a couple of my friends on not too long ago. You didn't have Gail Harvey and Katie Boland on?
Yep. I'm friends with Mike Boland, Gail's son. And then I met Katie and Gail through them. Yeah, you guys, funny story. I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to tell the story or not, but I was dealing with, I had a children's television show idea that I sent to somebody. And they sent me the contract back. And I was like, Gail, can you look at this contract? It doesn't feel right. And she sent me a sample contract that was her contract with you.
Oh, yes.
To make one of your books into like a TV movie or something like that.
Well, Gail and I go way back. Gail and I worked together at the Toronto Star. She was on the photo desk, and I was on the news desk. And then we reconnected years later in Prince Edward County. And Gail by then had quite a record of directing TV and film and documentaries. And she said, "Do you have some book that nobody's optioned that would make a good movie?" I said, "Yeah, I never saw it coming." I gave it to her, and she said, "Would you be willing to write a script on spec for this while I look for money?" And so I did, and we got that film made. So far, it hasn't gotten out of Canada, but it's a nice little movie. Never saw it coming. We've got Eric Roberts is in it, and Katie's in it, and Emily Hampshire stars in it.
Katie's like she's gonna go somewhere. I feel like there's gonna be a role for her, and she's just gonna go into the stratosphere because she's super talented, and she's she's a good writer too. But listen. Thank you so much for joining us. Good luck on the rest of your tour. I'm sure this is going to be another bestseller if it isn't already. And we thank you for having you. So Linwood Barclay, thank you very much, sir. It
was a pleasure. Take care, James.
You too. That was fun. I told him before we went on air that I hadn't read his entire book yet because I was like, I didn't want to get into the situation where it was like, so did you read the book? And I'd have to be like, I started reading it, but I didn't finish. But there's so much to talk about with him because he's just one of these guys that he's so well-rounded and he's got such a cool story and he's down to earth, kind of accessible too. He came on the podcast. So Linwood Barclay, thank you very much. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Listen, tomorrow at 6:30 we have Jackie Delaney, and she is going to talk about her work experience with Q107's John Derringer. And we're going to sort of unpack that. That is a story that's still developing. And we're just going to hear her out and see what she has to say about that. And then on Thursday, Dave, I laugh every time because it doesn't seem like a guest that I would have, but Dave Mercer, the king of fishing. And the reason why he's on the show, not that fishing is like not compelling, but we went to elementary school together. And my first memory of him is him picking up some kid and suplexing him and then pretending he was Hulk Hogan, but for some reason putting on a fake Scottish accent. So I'm going to ask him about that. And yeah, so we're going to see you tomorrow at 6:30. And until then, thanks for watching.
Blackballed. 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 Blackballed.
Thank you for having me. Look, journalism is dead. We'd all rather take selfies now than learn to comprehend. Look, I despise those colorblind, those self-absorbed reporters, those whores who suck the content for all the media hoarders. Those producers, man, they tap dance for the conglomerate's quarters. They exploit polarization, and it's done through gender, race, and borders. And meanwhile, they sell us fear, meds, and weapons every hour, leading bleeding screeds of misdeeds, but shit, none involving power. Those outlets, they insist they don't exist for shit clicks. Fuck, man, them pricks, they diss this writer like I was on some mysterious hit list. And the cable news, that's the villain. And I don't want to be mainstream. That's where fake dreams hit snakes and devils all up on the inseam. Know what I mean? A leg up into the armpit of all that corruption. Shit, this relationship, I think it's destined for a mutual destruction. Terror, mayhem. Nah, I know, I'll cool it with them J's. But you better send your fucking eagle and meet the talons of this goddamn osprey. Why? I've been blackballed before. Now I have to be my main source, looking out my front door, 'cause I've been blackballed, but now I am older. I know I have to keep on moving forward, never look over my shoulder. We live inside a landscape where editors are predators and writers get shelved and never properly mentored. Never cease to increase the pressure of the mighty pen's releases. I defeat your fucking arsenal with a single chess piece. Bless me, the non-believer. Fuck commies and libertarians and conservatives, liberals, anarchists, and Presbyterians. Fuck left-wingers, right-wingers, throat singers, salesmen. The hacks who got rocked by that mentally impaired kid. I hate all of you. Find the button, press play. Abort the next generation. Spare us from the next wave. And let's not blur the lines of yesterday. Just vibrate to your streetwise psilocybin sensei. It's true though, whether it's Trump or Justin Trudeau. New clothes for those who lie straight-faced. And kudos to faith-based race baiters. You guilty, shameful haters. Pull the plug, your crossfader is filthy. You milk these new breeds of dummies who promote racism and then cry to their mummies. MAGA, woke folks fight to a mutual death, and no one's left to foster divisions after the last breath. Now fucking die already. Seriously. Oh, but wait, one more thing. Bring your newspapers in case we all run out of confetti. I've been blackballed before. Now I have to be my main source, looking out my front door, 'cause I've been blackballed, but now I am older. I know I have to keep on moving forward, never look over my shoulder.